Hi, everybody. It's Pastor Josh back here with another lesson on our financial stewardship series. And I want to welcome you today. I'm glad that you're here joining us. And today we're going to be looking at budgets and how to put together a budget, how to refine your budget, and to make corrections. Now, this is a financial stewardship class, and it's based on a biblical foundation and biblical principles. And if you're just joining us, we covered those biblical principles in lessons 1 and 2. We're now on lesson 4. And if you haven't viewed those lessons yet, I'm just going to ask you to stop right here and go view those lessons and then come back, because that's really the foundation. And without that biblical foundation, what we're doing here today is really not going to be as much of a help for you. We just really want to make sure that you are building your life and trying to handle your finances in a way that would really be honoring the Lord, and really that it's in accordance with God's word. So I'm going to ask you to go ahead and do that. So let me just give you a quick review. We saw in lesson 1 that we were dealing with key attitudes. These key attitudes and truths that we see in the scriptures are ownership. That first key attitude is understanding that God is the owner of all things. And the things that I have, my possessions, really don't belong to me. They belong to the Lord. And He's the owner of all those things. And so we need to keep that truth in mind. And then we talked about the attitude of contentment, and knowing that we need to be content with what the Lord has portioned out to us. And some of you He's portioned out a lot, and some of you He's portioned out a little, but He always portions out what you need, and with that we could be content. And Scripture tells us that with food and clothing, if we have these things, with these we shall be content. And God will always take care of our needs. He doesn't always fulfill all of our wants. Oftentimes He does, as a gracious and good Father, but He promises to always meet our needs. And so we looked at those attitudes of ownership, contentment, and then a proper response, which is thankfulness. We need to be thankful and acknowledge the Lord for what He has entrusted to us. And then in lesson 2, we looked at sinful spending, and we looked at how money can be an idol, and how we can't worship two masters. We can't serve them both. We can't serve God and money. We have to prioritize God over money. And if you try to go after both, you're going to be double-minded, and you're going to bring lots of pain into your life. And then in lesson 3, we looked at dealing with debt, and really understanding debt, how to pay off debt, and then really looking at the dangers of debt, and then looking at the key principle of refusing to accumulate any more debt. If you want to get your finances under control, you want to be living within a budget and living below your means, you need to stop accumulating debt. And that means you need to pay off debt and get out of debt and stop accumulating any more. And that was something that I challenged you to make sure you're getting out of debt, and make that a commitment, and then take actions to get out of debt. And then today what we're going to do is look at budgets, and how to put together a budget. And a budget is basically a spending guide. There's a couple things that you need to know in order to put together your budget and have a budget that is workable, that you could live by. And so if you're taking notes, I'm going to give you several headings here. And the first one is you need to know your income. And so go ahead and put that down on your notes. The second one that we're going to see is you need to know your spending categories. And what are the categories that you're spending your money on? And you might be surprised, and you need to be able to list those out. And then you need to, our third heading, we're going to talk about gathering your expense materials and bringing together, maybe you know your spending categories, but you don't know what you're spending in those. And so it takes a little bit of research. You need to go through your bank statements. You need to go through your credit card statements. You need to go through your bills and bring those all together so you can put down your budget. And those are kind of the big 3 areas that we're going to be looking at today. And then I'm going to be walking you through category by category, and maybe helping you see expenses that you have that maybe you didn't realize. And these are fair game for cutting expenses and to helping you live within your budget. So Let's go ahead and take a look at the first one, and that is knowing your income. You need to know what your income is. And that is a little bit difficult to do nowadays with direct deposit being so popular that you get paid and the money shows up in your checking account or your savings account, and it kind of blends in with the remaining money that you have in there. And so sometimes it's difficult to know what your actual income is. And if you don't know what your income is, then it's going to be hard to spend and live within your means and spend less than your income. And so this is what you need to do. Take all of the sources of your income and you add them together. This is your net income. So you might have your regular job, and maybe you do a little side work on the side, and maybe you get a little bit of spending money. Grandma sends you some money, or you have some periodic work that you do. Well, you take that and you add that all up, and that becomes your yearly net income. And this is really important because you need to know what your baseline is. It's important for several reasons. You need to know what you can handle inside your budget, but you also need to know what is it that I'm earning, and so I could give to the Lord, and so I could give to those that are in need. And it's important when we talk about giving. We talked about it in previous lessons that giving is always described in Scripture as proportional. So whether we look at the Old Testament, we use tithe language, that's a tenth, but that's a proportion of total income and earnings. Or whether we talk about the New Testament, that the Corinthians were instructed to save up and to put aside as the Lord prospers them, so that they can make a contribution to the Apostle Paul. Again, that is a proportional type of income. So for just ease of numbers today, we're going to be just basing our giving on a 10% of our income. I want to encourage you, 10% isn't the ceiling of your giving, but maybe think of 10% as the floor. This is a good place to start, and I could increase my giving from there. So the first thing we really need to do is to know our income. That helps us with budget and with giving. And so we need to be able to add that all together. And then you could divide that up by 12. And so you have your yearly income and then your monthly income. So that's the first step. That kind of gives us the baseline. So the second step, what we want to do, if you're taking notes, is you need to know your spending categories. And as you're putting together your budget, it's good that you know how much you're earning, but you also need to know, well, what am I spending my money on, and where is this going towards? And so let me just give you a quick rundown that you could see. The first one is your tithes and offerings to the Lord, and you'll see as we take a look at our budget breakdown, you'll see giving is right there at the top of the list. And so giving to the Lord first, that's an important principle. So our spending categories will be things like our tithes and giving to the Lord, taxes, saving. Now notice that the first three categories, when we talk about spending, these are things that oftentimes are placed last in people's lists. Well, I'll give to the Lord, when I have stuff left over, or I haven't thought about taxes all year, but now, I got to pay my taxes, and so it's like I have to scramble, or I haven't been saving regularly. And well, let's take those three categories and let's prioritize them. Let's move them to the top of the list. And so we're giving to the Lord, we're saving for taxes, and we're saving just for our own savings. So those are the first three categories. Oftentimes are neglected and overlooked, but you're trying to do something responsible and wise, and so you're not going to overlook those or neglect those. You're going to make them a priority, and so that's good. Now we'll look at the fourth one. The fourth one would be our housing expenses. And this is the simplified list, but when you talk about your housing expenses, this is your rent or your mortgage. We're talking about your utilities, maintenance, insurance, furnishings, all these things that go into making your house or your apartment livable, that would all fall under housing. And so you need to really identify how much am I spending on housing. And it's not just that rent number, and it's not just the insurance number. There's other things that are involved in that, and you need to know. So when you create your budget, you're able to be realistic. And then we'll add to that, we have food expenses, your food for the month. You have your auto transportation expenses, your clothing expenses, medical type expenses. We're going to look at entertainment expenses. We're going to add to that insurance is life insurance or maybe long-term care insurance. This is insurance that wouldn't fall under like your housing insurance, and it wouldn't fall under your auto insurance. So all of those types of insurances. And then we're going to look at another spending category is your debt. This is money that you've already spent. Now you have to pay it back, and don't forget that. And then we're going to talk about investments, and then other miscellaneous expenses. And so if you have, this is kind of the basic list. So tithing, taxes, saving, housing, food, auto, clothing, medical, entertainment, insurance, debt, investments, and miscellaneous. So all of those are important. Let me hold this up. Can you see that? There we go. There it is. Okay, so that is our simplified list. And so you need to be able to think your way through all those categories and list how much am I spending and all of these things. And that's why it's important to gather that data together, and that gives you your budget. So when we think of a budget, the first side that we really think about is over here. Okay, this is your income side, and so this is what I make yearly, this is what I make monthly. Okay, this is what I have to live on. And then you need to put together your spending category side, which says, okay, this is what I am going to be using the money on. And ideally, what you should have is one equals the other, or you have more income than expenses. Most people have it the other way around. They have more expenses than income, and that means that every month they're going into debt, and the credit card is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And we want to help you get out of that. If you're in that, then we want to help you get out of it, and you can. Let me just encourage you. You're gonna be able to do that. Maybe you just haven't been taught how to deal with finances and handle these things, but listening to this series and then having a commitment to put it into practice, it will definitely help you. And so I want to encourage you. For those of you that have a budget already and you're spending less than you make and you're living below your means, I just want to congratulate you, and that's very exciting. And with what you're able to save and accumulate over the years, you're going to be able to do a lot of really great things. So I want to encourage you on that. So let's talk about our third heading. So now you know your income, and now you know your spending categories. Well, now you need to gather your expense materials. And so this is that second part of the budget, where basically you need to be able to look and say, how much am I spending every month in each of these areas? And you may know off the bat some of these things you might not know. So you think of your housing, and this is how much I pay for rent every month. But then they say, well, how much do you pay for your utilities? Well, I don't know. I need to do the math. And maybe you have a ballpark figure. Or how much are you paying for your auto insurance? Or how much are you paying for your car? How much did you pay last year for your maintenance? You might not know. And so it takes a little bit of homework, but you need to start putting together and say, hey, these are my categories of spending, and how much am I spending in each of these categories. So this would include everything that you pay on a monthly basis. So this would be your mortgage or your rent. This is going to be your credit card debt. Some of you might be doing the minimum monthly payment for your credit cards. Others of you are paying most of it off or all of it off, but you need to know, what am I spending every month? What are my utilities? What's the cable and the internet and my phone? All of these things. And so you need to look through your bills and you need to put this together. And what you'll notice is that it fluctuates monthly. And so you want to put together, say you're just starting out and say, hey, let me look up what I spent last year, or I'm sorry, last month, and then I'm still in this month, and let me just be real detailed on what I'm spending this month. And then when you get to next month, do the same thing, and you'll notice that you'll see things that you didn't see previously. And once you get a couple, 2, 3, 4 months where you have gathered your expense materials together, then you get a pretty good idea of how much are you spending every month. And then you'll be able to compare your income with your expenses and see, whoa, hey, am I doing good, or is there a problem here? And you'll be able to look and see, hey, if you're spending more than you make, then no wonder you're in debt. And no wonder you're feeling the pressure and it's a hardship on you. And so you need to start gathering your expenses and try to put at least 2 or 3 months of your expenses together. And then the same thing with your income. Sometimes your income fluctuates, especially if you're working a job where it's commissions or you make a lot of tips. Then you need to be able to get a couple months where you're tracking it, where you could have trends and you could see and then average it out. So that's your expenses and your income. So let's go ahead and take a look at a sample budget. So very simple to do. You could do it on just a plain white sheet of paper. Creating your budget on one side, like I mentioned before, you take your income, and then on the other side, you draw a line, and then you start listing your expenses and put that all together. And as you're creating it, you'll be able to see very quickly as you add up all of these expenses that how you're doing. And one thing that you need to remember is you need to make sure you include your irregular expenses. So we all have regular monthly expenses, our food, our rent, mortgage, but some of you have, well, probably all of us have expenses that pop up on a semi-annual basis. So for me, I have property insurance that pops up, and we get that in the fall and in the spring, and we got to pay for it. It's not included in our mortgage. And so you need to prepare for those bills because you know that they're going to come. Some of you pay off your insurance 6 months in advance for your car, and you need to make sure you have those expenses put together. Some of you are going to school, and so you pay your tuition all one lump sum. But take those irregular expenses and divide them up by 12, and that becomes your monthly expense, and you're able to put that into your budget, and you're able to put money aside and save up for that. And that's something that's really important. A lot of times people just get so fixated on their monthly expenses that they forget about these irregular expenses that come up, but not you. You plan ahead, and so want to make sure that you include that in your monthly expenses. And so just take that amount, whatever it is that you pay yearly or a couple times a year, and then divide it by 12, and then you can add it into your monthly expenses. So once you do that, you have the income, and then you have the expense side of your budget, and then you add it up and you see which one is bigger, and that'll give you a good idea of just where you are. And maybe you do that for last month, you do it this month, and the next month, and it'll give you a trend. And it'll just really help you to see, hey, what is the condition? I'm doing an assessment, and what do I have to do to make changes? So knowing where you're at and the starting point, that's going to help you to make decisions to get to where you want to be and to where you need to be. So I've already showed you the abbreviated expense list, and we looked at those. And those are things like tithing, taxes, saving, housing, food, auto, clothing, medical, entertainment, insurance, debt, investments, and just other miscellaneous spending. So what I want to do right now is give you a couple more. Let's see here. So when we talk about giving, we talk about our tithe to the church, giving, and remember 10%, using that just for argument. I think 10% is a good place to start in our proportional giving to the Lord, but that's not the ending place. And then maybe you might have a missionary that you support. Maybe you support World Vision, or you have a child that you've adopted in a foreign country and you're paying for them, $20 a month or whatever it may be. And then maybe just needs outside the church, that you're given to homeless folks, or maybe you're helping your family, or, there's just other needs. So that's the giving. When we're talking about savings, talking about putting aside and saving for an emergency fund, having a long-term savings fund. Maybe you want to purchase a home someday and you're saving up for your down payment. That would be more of a long-term savings. Maybe you're saving for your retirement. You're putting into a 401k or another savings vehicle. That is something that you need to be thinking of. And then designated savings. Maybe you're saving for your kids' college. Maybe you're saving for Christmas or vacation, something coming up. So those things, those are all important categories for savings. And so the reason why I show you that is it's if you've not had a habit of savings, when you think about savings, you're just like, oh, that's saving. I'm putting money aside. And then you run into an emergency, or something breaks down, you use that for purchases. Maybe having several different savings vehicles that you're using that would really help motivate you to save, but also protect those savings as well too, that you're not dipping into them for just because you want to. So let's take a look at the next category here, and let's talk about housing. So when we talk about housing, as you put your budget together, we're talking about your rent or your mortgage payment, talking about property tax, those of you that own your own home. We're talking about homeowners insurance or renters insurance. If you're a renter, I encourage you to get renters insurance. That's just an extra protection. It might cost you $20, $25 a month, but is a really good peace of mind. We're talking about in-housing utilities, so your water, sewer, trash, electric, gas, cable, or internet. If you live in a place where there's homeowners association dues, then you need to set aside for that. When we're talking about housing, we're talking about furniture, furnishings, and then all of your supplies and maintenance type items. So these are all important areas. So when you talk about housing, it's easy just to say, oh, my rent is however many dollars a month. But you need to include, what are your furnishings, what are all these things that you're putting together. Having a detailed expense list and thinking through what all your expenses are actually is really going to help you, especially as you're preparing for marriage. Some of you may be watching this and you're thinking, hey, it's like, I'm going to be getting married in a year or so, and I need to get my budget underway, and how do I prepare, for what are our expenses going to be when we're married? Well, having a detailed list is going to help you. And this is where it's good to have a trusted Christian friend that handles their finances in a God-honoring way. And as you put together your budget, hey, these are my expenses, show it to them. Maybe you don't show them the dollar amount, but you ask them, hey, can you look through this? Are there any categories that I am neglecting, anything that I'm not aware of that I should be aware of? So those are important things to really think about. That's why I'm giving you the detailed list. All right, well, let's look back at the list. And for those of you with children, talk about child care expenses. Some of you may be in a situation where you're paying child support. So you need to be able to budget for child care. We're talking about special food, diapers, formula, baby wipes, all those things. We have a 6-month baby in the house right now, and boy, she's eating a lot of formula and using up a lot of diapers and wipes. So you need to be able to budget for those things. Okay, and then we're going to go on to our next expense category. That would be education. So tuition. A lot of times people, they think of education and it's just a matter of what's the tuition. Well, you have to include in there your books, school supplies, field trips and miscellaneous fees. Maybe you have student loans. So you have just all sorts of different lab fees, transportation expenses for school, and this is true even if it's not for your education. You have children and they have school fees. Maybe they might even be going to public school, but to go on field trips and things like that, it's always extra expenses. And then we'll add to that list of expenses, talking about gifts. And so Christmas, birthday, other special occasions, and you have commitments where you're going to be purchasing gifts for folks, and you need to be able to budget for that. And then you have job expenses. So you have job expenses. Sometimes they're reimbursed, and whatever you spend for your job, you're able to turn in reimbursements, and then that is reimbursed to you. But sometimes not, and so you need to be able to budget for that. You may have clothing expenses for your job. You may have professional dues. You may have uh, just supplies that you use are just part of your job expenses, and so you need to be able to budget for those. And then taxes. We talked a little bit about taxes, but income tax, social security tax. Some of you have businesses and you're self-employed, and so this means that you have to pay your own social security and income tax. So taxes are something that you need to prepare for and plan ahead for. We'll add in that list vacation. So you'd like to take a vacation, we'll budget for it and determine how much you spend for vacations every year. And maybe you need to adjust that. Maybe you need to spend more. Sometimes you need to spend less. All right, let's see what else we have here. So that's the end of our list. So you want to take all of those expense categories, and you could see why earlier on I gave you the simplified list. And now I went through more of the detailed list to help you just think through these categories of your expenses. And then what you need to do is take those and then add them up. Well, what's my monthly average? And then this is what you're spending average monthly, and then you compare that with your income. So you may be over budget and you're spending more than you make, or you may be under budget and you're making more than you spend, and then you need to make adjustments to that. So let me give you just a little sample here. This is the sample. I just put this together, and this is based on a $3,000 per month income. So nothing too spectacular, but it'll help you see how you put it together. So let's just, you see that I have just the spending category, and this is, and then I have it all totaled up on the one side. So we're going to start off with giving 10% to the Lord. And then we're going to start off with savings, just a modest $50 a month. And then we're going to look at our housing expenses. Let's say your rent is $800 a month. Let's say your insurance is about $66 a month. Water, trash, electric, gas, it's all added in there. Your cable, internet, and phone. And then supplies and maintenance. So you're paying about $1,300 a month for your housing expenses. We move down, we see your food. Food is maybe $400 a month. That'll depend on the size of your family and your spending habits when it comes to food. All right, and let's continue on. We're going to talk about auto. So you're spending $100 in fuel a month. You have a car payment of $250. Your insurance is about $100 a month, and your registration that comes yearly, but you break it down. It's about $120 for the year, and so you break that down. That's $10, and then maintenance is about $30 a month. So you're paying almost $500 a month for the privilege of having a car. So $490 a month. Let's say for clothing, you're spending about $100 a month on clothing, and then for your insurance, medical insurance, and life insurance, you're paying about $328. Right now, you don't have long-term care insurance, and that's okay. If you could add that in sooner rather than later, that's better. But at this point, let's say you're young, it's not a real big deal. All right, let's see here. Trying to not be in the shot. Okay. Let's talk about health care. Let's say you're very fortunate because your job pays for your health insurance, and so all you have to do is doctor copays and then prescription eyeglass copays, things like that. So it's relatively cheap. You're kind of spoiled. You're about $34 a month. And then leisure and entertainment, eating at restaurants, $100 a month, movies and music, other media. Maybe you're at $25 a month for trips and events, $50 a month, and then just spending money on fun stuff, hobbies and whatnot. And you're about $50. So you're about $225 a month on entertainment type items. You don't really have any hobbies, and you don't have any pets, so you save money there. Your debt, let's just say that you're paying off the minimum balance for a Visa and a MasterCard, and so you're paying around $63 a month. And then for your investments, for your IRA and mutual funds and other assets, right now you're not putting anything in per month. And so you have a total monthly expense of $3,293 for your sample budget. So in some categories, you're not spending anything, and that could be good. But when it comes to saving and investment, if you're not doing those things, then even though you're not spending that money, that's not good because you're not going to have growth. So this is based on a $3,000 a month income, but you're almost $300 over budget. So let me just point out some things. Okay, so this is what maybe your budget looks like this, or it's similar. So for our hypothetical person here, I'm going to point out some things. Number one is that you're spending more than what you make, and that's not good. Number two, we could see why you're in debt and why you're just paying the minimum balance, because you're having to use your credit cards to get by, and because of that, you've raked up, almost a $3,000 balance on your Visa and a $3,500 balance on your MasterCard, and because of that, you're accumulating more debt, almost $300 of debt every month. Now, this is if everything goes perfect. If you don't have any major problems, breakdowns, whatever, then every month you're getting into debt by about $300 a month, best case scenario. So some things need to change. And so I show you this. And the next step is just to think through, okay, well, what do I do to make up for this $300 deficit? You could do two things, okay, right? So to bring this budget into a balanced condition, you could either cut expenses or you could raise your income, or you could do a combination of the both. So if you are $300 in debt, You think, okay, I'm gonna leave my finances and my spending where it's at, but what can I do to earn an extra $300 a month? And some of you, you may have the ability to work overtime. You may have the ability to get a second job. You may have the ability to do other things, and you make up for that income, and you solve your budget problems. But not everyone is in that position. I think a better idea is that you look and say, hey, what do I do to bring some of my spending under control and correct the problem that way? Because if you don't bring the spending under control, then things really aren't going to change. Most of the time when people have budget problems, they have a spending sided problem, not an earning sided problem. And so we want to help you to have your spending side under control. So if we take a look at the budget, and if you remember, some of these expenses are fixed expenses. There's nothing that you could do about them. But there are some categories that are voluntary expenses. Like, for example, your leisure and entertainment. Like, you're volunteering to spend the money in these areas. You don't have to, right? If you don't go out to restaurants, or if you don't go to these entertainment events, no one is going to evict you from your apartment or your house. No one's going to take away your car. No one's going to ding your credit. And so it's important to look and see, what are the expenses that I have that are voluntary expenses? I can't do anything about my my housing. I can't do anything about insurance. I can't do anything about some of these areas, but I can make changes when it comes to entertainment. I can make changes when it comes to food. I can make changes when it comes to my car. I can make changes when it comes to these areas, these voluntary expenses, and knowing that you can make changes, and you could cut these things, and you can really save yourself money and correct your budget. So let's just quickly work our way through this. And one of the first areas that you could look at is your food expense. And I'm going to just give you 8 questions that you could ask. First question is this: what kind of convenience items are being purchased? It's a good possibility that you're spending more on food because you're purchasing convenience items, pre-cooked, pre-packaged, all of these things. You know, you could buy an apple at the store for 89 cents a pound, or you could buy, you know, one of those apples that comes pre-sliced and vacuum packed, and you pay 3 times as much for that, where by just buying the whole food, you could save money. So what convenience or pre-packaged items are you purchasing? So these would be things like takeout, pizza, ready-made meals, TV dinners, microwave dinners, these sorts of things. Okay, we could ask the second question: what kind of treats are being purchased? So maybe you're purchasing unnecessary foods that are like junk foods, treat foods, ice creams and sodas and snacks, things like that. Maybe you're purchasing luxury type items. You love seafood, or you love steak, or you love, you know, these special deli meats, or desserts, or pastries, or whatever it may be. Well, those would fall under the category of luxury type items, and you could get by without them. You're just making a choice to pay more for these things. Let me ask you a third question: what store brand items can be substituted for name brand items? Maybe you're buying name brand items where you could buy the generic instead, and you could save 20, 30% or even more. There's a fourth question: what are healthy, fresh, and low-cost items that can be incorporated into a new diet? Maybe you have items that you buy that's just what you buy, and that's what you're comfortable with. But you know, are there healthy and fresh, low-cost alternatives that you can start purchasing? And that's kind of a double benefit for your health and for your wallet. Let me ask you question number 5: is food being thrown away? Are you having spoilage and wastefulness? Maybe you open up a bottle of salad dressing and you use half of it, and it sits in your fridge for 6, 7, 8 months, and then the next time you go to use it, there's green stuff growing on it, and you've just wasted half of that salad dressing. Or you buy fruits and vegetables and they go bad in the fridge or on your fruit bowl on the counter. Or maybe you stock up because you got a really good deal, but you've left the food in the freezer too long, gets freezer burned, and then you have to throw it away. So you want to be aware and avoid spoilage and wastefulness. Number 6 are using sales and coupons to save on your groceries. It's using grocery coupons will be helpful as long as they don't sucker you into spending more by saying, well, you could get so much percentage off, but if you have to buy 5 at a time or something like that. And that might turn into a spoilage situation. So you have to be able to do the math and know it's going to be the most savings for you. All right, here's a big one, number 7. What kind of organic or niche food items are you paying for, and is the price justified? So a lot of organic stuff is very popular, and people going with gluten-free and organic, and you buy organic milk, and it's twice the price as just the regular milk. And is that justified? Well, you might have a medical condition where it is, or maybe it's just you like buying organic, but your health isn't affected either way by it. Well, maybe you need to think about, instead of buying those kind of niche items, that you just buy, the standard basic generic stuff. Number 8 is a good question. How many unnecessary or redundant products are being purchased? So things like bottled water and vitamins, or protein shakes or diet type products. These are redundant type of products. If you have a good healthy diet, you don't really need vitamins. And you don't really need to buy bottled water. Why don't you get a water filtering pitcher? You put it in the fridge, and pay $19 for it, and it lasts several years. Or you're buying other items that are redundant. If you have a healthy diet and you're eating the right kind of things, you don't need to have all of these types of supplements. And so you might be spending money unnecessarily on these redundant type products. And so just want to help you think through, do I really need to get these things? And then number 9, what type of specialty items am I purchasing? Am I purchasing fancy coffees or teas or chocolates, or am I purchasing other things that are just kind of luxury type items where they're really not essential? Well, you might be able to take your food budget and you might be able to cut it by 20% or 25%. You might be able to cut it even more, 50%, if you really get basic. But understanding that food and those choices that you make, those are voluntary expenses. And so when you think about your food budget, that's an area where you can make adjustments and you could cut your budget. Let's take a look at a second place where we could cut our budget. Now remember, we looked at our imaginary sample budget where we're making $3,000 a month and we're over budget by roughly 10%. So where do we cut from? Well, we could cut in the area of food. But let's take a look at another area. We could cut in the area of entertainment. So let's take a look here. Leisure and entertainment. Look at that. Where am I? Come on. $225. Okay, so just with this one area, if you say, hey, listen, I'm gonna stop eating at restaurants and I'm going to cut out these entertainment leisure activities, just by making that one decision, you could almost solve your problem. Now that's going to be really tough, and I'm not going to suggest that you just cut out complete entertainment, because all work and no play will turn you into me. And that's not the funnest thing. So I want to start by saying, maybe you can commit to cutting your spending in entertainment by 50% or 60% and say, hey, listen, I like going to restaurants, I like doing these things, and we need to have some fun in our lives, but let's cut a portion of this. And so maybe you cut 60% or you cut 50% out of your entertainment budget. Well, that's going to bring you almost halfway to solving your budget problems. So knowing that entertainment, this is a voluntary expense category, and so you can make decisions and make changes to minimize this area for the greater good of your budget. Well, let's take a look at another one. What about your auto expenses? Your auto expenses, this is an area where you think, well, hey, listen, I need to have my car, I need to drive, there's no public transportation to get to my work, and that's fine, and I understand that. It's if you live in the Western United States, you need a car. But here's some questions for you to ask and say, am I wasting fuel by making unnecessary trips? And maybe you're driving, but you're wasting fuel because you're going here, there, and everywhere. But if you were to just combine your trips and your chores and just knock that out and minimize any unnecessary driving, you could save a good amount of money on your fuel. You can save a good amount of money on your maintenance and mileage on the vehicle. Okay, here's another one, a big one that people don't think of. And this question is, can I save money on my insurance? Say, well, what do you mean? The insurance, it's mandatory. It's like, yes, the insurance is mandatory, but the state doesn't tell you which company you go with. When was the last time you shopped around for your auto insurance? And maybe you need to get on the phone and you call around and you get quotes for the same coverage that you have right now, and you may discover that you save $30 a month or more on your insurance, and you've been with the same company for 5, 6, 7 years just because they send you the renewal, and then you renew. Well, shop around and see what kind of deals you could get. Maybe you need to ask, what is my deductible? Maybe I have a $500 deductible, and you could save money by raising that deductible to $1,000. Maybe you have full collision, comprehensive everything, and it's a vehicle that is $5,000, $6,000, where really all you need is liability on that vehicle. That's another savings that you could have, and so you could save money by shopping around and adjusting your insurance. Maybe you have higher coverage than you need. You're a college student, and why do you need such high levels of coverage? Where you could reduce those and you could save money monthly or yearly. Here's another big one. How much is still owed on the vehicle, and can the vehicle be sold in order to purchase a cheaper vehicle? Maybe you're paying, like our sample budget here, the person is paying $250 a month for their auto loan, and if they sell that car and they buy something cheaper outright, now you don't have a car payment. You're just paying for your gas and your insurance and your maintenance, but you own the car outright. You don't have a payment to make. That frees up $250 in your budget. So there's lots of ways where you can look at your budget and say, hey, what can I adjust? What can I cut? What can I save? So you could do that with food or with your entertainment or with your auto. And those are the areas that I think a lot of times get overlooked, and people think about these things and they think, well, I got to have insurance, and so I just got to pay whatever they tell me the premium is, or I got to eat food, and so I'm just going to buy what I normally buy. No, like, you have the ability to make decisions and to make choices, and you need to make choices that are going to be good for you, that are going to be good for your budget, that are going to allow you to give, that are going to allow you to save, that are going to allow you to invest. And so taking a little bit of a sacrifice up front for long-term good, that's a really good thing to do, and you'll be glad that you did. So we already looked at where to cut. We could cut in food or entertainment or in our auto expenses. What about a fourth one? What about your housing? You could cut in your housing, and you ask and say, what bills do I have that are voluntary, and what can I eliminate? And so maybe you might have, for your housing, you have bills that you can eliminate. So many people are letting go of their home phone. Why do I need a home phone? I have my cell phone. And so that's a bill that you could cut. Or how can I lower my electricity usage, or my gas usage? What could I do to save in my housing? Housing is a little bit tougher to save on, because you need a place to live, you need gas, you need electricity, and most people don't waste just on average, and so it's kind of tough to cut back. But let's say you're a couple, you're a middle-aged couple, you have a couple children, one is in college, one is finishing up high school, you have a really tight budget, and but you have an extra room in your house, and and you think, well, hey, it's just our high school daughter who's living here. Maybe we rent out a room to a college age young lady who could stay at the house and pay rent for that room, and that becomes a little bit of an income for us. Well, that income offsets your housing. And so you have the room there, your other daughter is off at college, and so this could be a blessing for you and for someone else. And so sometimes with housing, you can't really cut expenses, but you can use your housing to produce an income that will offset. So these are things, hopefully what I'm sharing with you are things that are going to just help you in your thinking, and say, hey, I never thought about that. And if I do make these decisions, it could have a really good impact on my budget. And so that's what I want to do, is just really help you. Let's take a look at a couple more as we wind down here. Let's take a look at clothing. So a couple questions for you. Do my clothing purchases exceed my needs? And maybe you're spending more on clothing than you need to, and what generic brands can be substituted? What low cost things can I substitute? Maybe you need to go the other way. Maybe you're in sales or business, and you focus so much on your craft that you haven't really focused much on your clothing and the way that you present yourself. And so to say, hey, maybe I need to step it up a little bit more, and raise the level of my dress and my grooming, and that will help me in my business. And so maybe you need to go the other way. Rather than cutting, maybe you do need to make some strategic investments in this area to help you in your business. So for clothing, if you are trying to cut, one of the questions to ask is, what items can be purchased off season to save money? So if you have kind of a reverse view of things, in the wintertime, you buy your summertime clothing. Everything goes on special and sale. And so, when you're getting geared up for summertime is actually in the wintertime. And then when the summertime hits, all the winter stuff goes on sale, and you need a new coat, or you need new boots, or whatever. And then you're able to buy at a discount. And so that takes some forethought and some planning ahead. All of these things that you see in the budget, a lot of it are really just planning ahead and thinking ahead, and that will really be a benefit to you. So you could do the same thing with clothing as you plan ahead. And so let's say you take those things and you look and say, hey, for food, I can, I could adjust down. I could save. I'm going to make it a goal. I want to cut 10% on my food budget, and I think you could do that very, very easily. And maybe you commit to saying, hey, I'm going to cut 70% out of my entertainment type of spending. And then maybe you say, I'm going to go and I'm going to shop around and look at what I could save on my auto insurance. And by doing those three things, guess what? You save $350 a month, and now you're under budget. And so you've gone from being almost $300 over budget to now you have an extra $60 or so in your budget, and you could take that extra money and you could use that to pay off your credit cards. And let's say when you pay off your credit cards, then you'll have another $80, $90, $100 a month to save. And so just by making a couple of thoughtful and strategic changes to your budget and your spending habits, you're able to go from being, say, over budget by $300 a month to being under budget by $150 a month. And you say, $150 a month, that's not a whole lot. But when you come to the end of the year, you have those savings. That's significant. Let's say you are able to adjust your budget and to where you have $300 at the end of the month, where you say, hey, with that $300, I'm already saving strategically. I'm already giving to the Lord. And what I could do is maybe I can increase my savings and my giving to the Lord, and I have money left over to invest and put into an IRA or to put into my 401k, and I could have money beginning to grow. So when you think about your monthly budget, what we want to do is help you to get to the point where your spending and your saving is able to reverse this way. So you're living below your means, you have money left over at the end of the month, and you're able to take that money and put it towards things that are going to grow and be a long-term benefit. So hopefully that helped you. I want to really encourage you to start tracking your expenses and put together what your monthly earnings average is and your monthly expenses average. And then if you're over budget, to make those tough decisions and to make those wise decisions, to bring that back into a proper proportion so it'll be a long-term benefit for you. So next week, we're going to talk a little bit more about budgets and some other things that you could do. Hopefully, this is a real benefit for you. I'm hoping that this is going to be something that's going to be a real blessing to you and your family, and we could get you to the point where you're being healthy and financially wise and financially stable and ultimately glorifying to the Lord. So until next time, have a great day. God bless you. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower becomes the lender's slave.